Students who study smarter have a greater awareness of their own thinking and memory processes. This awareness is called metacognition and is a learned skill that involves thinking about your own thinking. It's why high performance students tend to study how to study. It can give you a massive advantage because you start to study far more efficiently. Average students, on the other hand, they tend to study passively and they don't seem to know if or when they have actually learned the material. Therefore, as a result, average students study harder. They read and reread and try to memorize the content instead of truly understanding the meaning of the content and learning a whole concept or idea. You can study passively for 12 hours, but someone studying actively for 4 hours will probably consume just as much information. So in this video, I'm going to go over several ways how you can do that. The 60-second review. The 60-second review is an incredibly useful activity that can be used pretty much anywhere. So during a lecture, just after it's finished or when everyone is packing up, or even just before everyone is packing up, take 60 seconds to write a couple of sentences summarizing the main 2 or 3 points of what you just learned in your lecture. It only takes 60 seconds, but it's a phenomenally effective use of that 60 seconds because you're forcing your brain to recall and process the main 2 or 3 points in the lecture. Therefore, you're cementing that knowledge into your brain by moving it from your short-term memory over to your long-term memory. If you carry out this 60-second activity after every lecture and you turn it into a habit, although it only takes 60 seconds over the course of the semester, it can have a massively compounding result in terms of the information that you're actually able to retain from your lectures. A slightly different version to this activity is to jot down a couple of points from the lecture that you feel was the least clear, that you didn't really understand that well. Again, this shouldn't take you more than 60 seconds, but it will help you identify the gaps in your knowledge, and that right there is the first step to fixing them. You see, when you're studying smart, you're constantly analyzing how you're learning and what you're learning. You're always trying to find flaws in your study strategy, and you're always trying to find gaps in your knowledge. So this is a great 60-second strategy that will quickly help you find those gaps and then go ahead and fill them up. And making this activity into a habit, so you're doing it daily, even multiple times a day, is when this 60-second strategy becomes extremely powerful. I made a video on 6 other high performance habits that successful students do that if you're not doing them, you could be massively missing out. You can click on the pop-up banner above to watch it. Close your eyes and review. So as I just mentioned, it's important that you're constantly trying to find the gaps in your knowledge so you can work on fixing them. But when you're reading your course material, it's easy to mix up recognizing the content as opposed to understanding the content. It's easy to kind of trick your brain into thinking you understand the topic when actually you're only recognizing the topic. So this is a common mistake a lot of students make because once you think that you understand the material, you're going to move on and learn other material, right? So a good way of dealing with this is to close your books or close your eyes and recall the information. If you can't recall the information, then you've not learned it well enough and you need to go back. If you can recall it relatively easily and relatively quickly, then it means that you understand it pretty well and you can move on. It's a super simple tool that you can use that I still use pretty much every time I study to kind of test myself and make sure that I actually have learned what I'm supposed to learn. Rewrite your notes. You'll notice that most of the strategies in this video focus on trying to eliminate passive studying, and this tip is no exception. So when you rewrite your notes, it gives your brain another opportunity to process the information rather than just passively glancing through the material. As you rewrite your notes, summarize and condense them down even further, so when it comes to revision for your exams, you aren't having to go through a huge pile of papers trying to find the information. Besides, smaller summarized bite-sized statements are far easier to understand and recall compared with paragraphs of boring text, right? There have also been studies that show that handwriting notes is better for memory retention compared with typing notes on a laptop or a computer. So firstly, because if you're using a laptop, you're far more likely to get distracted. I mean, we all know how easy it is to open a new tab and just start mindlessly browsing the internet, right? But a research paper titled "The Pen is Mightier Than the Keyboard," published in 2014 by Muller and Oppheimer, found that hand-taking notes is far more effective than taking notes on a laptop because it involves deeper processing. The study found that students that take notes on their laptops are more likely to just retype what their lecturer is saying rather than summarizing the points in their own words. On the other hand though, I'm not a fan of handwriting notes. That's just me personally. I don't particularly like the process of writing with a pen and paper. Typing is faster for me and just feels more fluid, I guess. So if you're like me and you prefer to type out your notes, just make sure that you are actually rewriting and summarizing your notes rather than copying them down word for word. The chunking technique. Chunking is when you take an individual piece of information and you group them together into larger units to help you memorize them. Probably the most common example of this are phone numbers. We usually string the numbers of a phone number into 2 or 3 parts, right, to help us remember them. Because by grouping each data point into a larger whole, the brain finds it easier to process and recall the information. And this is mainly because of how limited our short-term memory is. According to neuroscientist Daniel Bohr, who is also the author of The Ravenous Brain, chunking allows us to hack the limits of our memory by using our natural tendency to see patterns and make connections. So the next time you have to remember a long list, start by separating the list into smaller groups. And when you're creating these groups, look for ways you can relate units to each other by meaningful ways. So by looking for connections and associations, it will help your brain cement this information into your long-term memory. Test yourself frequently. Another strategy that is aimed to eliminate passive studying and encourage active studying. There have been numerous studies showing that self-testing is essential when it comes to improving academic performance. In one of the studies, University of Louisville psychologist Keith Lai taught an identical statistics course to 2 groups of university students. In the first group, the students were asked to complete a short quiz at the end of each lecture. In the second group, the students didn't have to complete any quizzes. And at the end of the course, the students in the first group, so the students that had to complete a short quiz after every lecture, significantly outperformed the second group in every single exam. So just a short quiz at the end of each lecture forced the students to recall the information that they had just learned, therefore reaffirming this knowledge in their long-term memory. It's why in the Transform Your Grades in 30 Days course that I launched a couple of months ago, after every single lecture for the entire 30 days, I have a short quiz at the end because it's so incredibly useful when it comes to memory retention and memory recall. It doesn't take long to complete each quiz, just 60 seconds or so, but the return from that 60 seconds is huge. And that's really what studying smarter rather than harder is all about. If you can implement a 60-second activity into your day that significantly improves your memory recall, why wouldn't you, right? And speaking of the course, it's still open for student enrollment. We're offering 30 lectures to help you study more efficiently over 30 days. We're offering worksheets, a productivity planner, a private Facebook community group, and one-on-one coaching. And on top of that, we have a 50% promotional discount. There's a link in the description below if you want to check it out. So when you are studying, don't just read your textbooks passively or take notes in class without even thinking about it. Study smart by quizzing yourself on key concepts, particularly at the end of the study session or at the end of a lecture. Just spending 1 or 2 lectures at the end of a study session can have significant improvements on your grades. Learn, don't memorize. So I see far too many students in my Transform Your Grades in 30 Days coaching program memorizing everything they read without trying to understand it. So they're studying really hard, they're putting in the hours, but then when their exams come around, their grades don't match with the number of hours they're putting into their studying. Because often exam questions are structured in a way that requires the application of knowledge. But once you understand the material, you'll be able to answer any question on that particular topic that might come up, and you can explain it very well. I guess when you memorize something, you learn it on a very basic level, whereas when you truly learn something, then you understand it on a far deeper level. The more paths in your mind that connect new information together, the easier and more coherent that data becomes, therefore the better position you'll be to answer any exam questions. Because pretty much the whole concept of study smarter, not harder, can be summed up in one sentence: study actively rather than passively. If you're prone to studying passively, then you're wasting a lot of time. Studying actively and fully understanding your material, it takes time. You'll make a lot of mistakes, you'll forget a lot of things, you'll probably get frustrated, but these areas are important in their own right. It just takes patience. And I used a lot of advanced study methods to trigger my brain into memorizing a lot of information in a short amount of time when I was at university, and I made a whole video on it, on how I went from D grades to A grades. You can click on the card on the screen to watch it. Alternatively, I made another video on how I'm able to study for 12 hours a day. Again, you can click on the card on whichever video you choose. I'll see you over there.